Missoula, Montana. Now, here's your host, Neil Chase.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's show. Now I'd like to introduce our special guest speaker for tonight. Right now, the guest is going to be giving our talk. His name is Kyle Schweitzer, and the name of his talk is The Tree of Life and the Mayan Connection. Kyle's been a Baha'i for over a year now, and he's a very proficient teacher of the faith. And some of the things he's going to be getting into tonight are just not something he read out of the library, because Kyle has already been down to Mexico, Yucatan Peninsula, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, and has first-hand information with the culture and prophecies and the native religions of the people of that area, as well as that of the scriptures that he'll be getting into and those of the Baha'i faith. And it's my great pleasure to introduce tonight Kyle Schweitzer.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. Tonight I'll be talking about the Tree of Life and the Mayan connection. So if you're familiar, first off, with the books that make up the Christian Bible, you have heard this phrase before, the Tree of Life. The book of Genesis, the first book in the Old Testament, as well as the last book in the New Testament, the book of Revelations, both speak of this Tree of Life. Now, what does this mean? Well, it has many meanings. It has several meanings. The one that I'm going to concentrate on tonight, first off, is that it is a symbol of our unity. Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, has told us that we are all the fruits of one tree. His son Abdul-Baha further elucidated this point by saying that the earth is but one nation, and mankind are its citizens. Now, on this show, sometimes perhaps you see what may seem like antagonistic and divisive viewpoints. And this is not our purpose. It's just so easy to get carried away when one sees how each of the major prophets, whether it be Krishna or Buddha or Moses or Jesus, all of them, even Baha'u'llah, has had their message taken and twisted and used and abused and manipulated by a few, by a powerful ruling class, by a priest class. And this is despicable. This is intolerable, unbearable. And we are told that we must deal ruthlessly with this priest class. We must shake them and let them know that this is wrong, what they're doing. You cannot make money from faith. Still, Abdul-Baha, in a letter to America, expressed this very clearly about how we are to teach the faith to the masses. He says, beware, lest you offend any soul. Any soul. And this exemplifies the spirit with which we are to give this forth to the masses, like giving a gift to a king. For religion is not to divide us. That's not why it came. The third of the 12 major basic principles of the Baha'i faith is just this, that religion, if it ever becomes the source of disunity, it is better that it didn't even exist at all. Still, this can never, ever be an excuse to eclipse the second principle of the Baha'i faith, which is the independent investigation of the truth. This is exactly what happened with the Baha'i faith in 1957, when the hands of the cause usurped the Baha'i administration with this cry of unity, of divine unity. We must preserve the cause. And now they have completely bamboozled all of the over 5 million Baha'is around the world into giving up their independent investigation of the truth. Now what is this truth? Now, all rhetoric, all these buzzwords, unity, and all this aside, still, a large part of the truth seems to be that we are connected, that we are one. Now, this to many people sounds like a very new agey concept. And it is all good and true, but how do we go about proving this? How do we systematically show that, yes, we are one? All things are connected. Well, a lot of research has been done on just this, to prove that all the prophets have come from the same God, because there's just one of them. There's not 4 or 3 or 2 or 6 gods. There's just one. Now today I'll be concentrating on the people in Central America and their belief systems. And let's see if we can't find out together how they too are part of this grand plan. Now the most logical, the biggest, most obvious place to start seems to be the pyramids. Now there are pyramids down in Central America. These are made with the same technology as those all the way across the Atlantic Ocean in Egypt, in the Middle East. Thousands of miles apart. And these were built thousands of years ago, at a time when supposedly there was no contact between these two places. Now, is this so? Was there no contact? It is not just a simple fact that there are pyramid cultures in Central America and there are pyramid cultures in the Middle East, in Egypt. Is that not proof enough that yes, there was some kind of communication between these two locations? Or if it is not, well, then we look deeper. And what we find is everything stemming from the same point. We find ourselves going back to where civilization had its start, in ancient Sumeria, back 6,000 years to what is now known as Kuwait, where the revelation of Adam first was proclaimed. Now, at this point, I hear a collective groan from all the archaeologists and all the scientific minds around the world saying, oh God, he's not going to start preaching about Adam, telling us that this was the first man 6,000 years ago. There were millions of people on the planet 6,000 years ago. Yes, this is true. This is what science tells us. And this is undeniable. This is a fact. So, what made Adam different? If it doesn't make sense to say that he was the first human on the planet, what made him different? What makes sense is that he was different in that he was the first human being in this current cycle to have the awareness of a creator, the first person with God consciousness. Now, from there, in Adam's revelation, it spread. It spread all over the world, in fact. As it spread, with it came the laws, the innovations, and the technology associated with this revelation. As it moved west, the people who brought it, as it moved west across the sea to this continent, the people who brought it would leave their signatures. They would leave messages in their language all along the places where they visited. And many of these have been found in New Mexico, all along the Mississippi, down into Central America. There are many artifacts, and as we look at this as a whole, we see a concrete stack of evidence as proof, undeniable proof, that, in fact, there were ancient voyagers that came from the east to this country. And they came over 5,000 years ago. And how they come? They came by boat across the Atlantic. Many records of ancient civilizations of Sumeria, Phoenicia, Mesopotamia of that time tell us that technology was present in their cultures. But the most indisputable proof is probably found outside of the largest pyramid in the world, Giza, along the banks of the Nile River in Egypt. Found just outside the pyramids, meticulously dismantled and buried in pits were boats, were large seaworthy vessels. And these were buried 3,400 years before Christ. Still, the biggest proof for this connection seems to be inside the pyramid. Unlike any other pyramid in the world, Giza is different. It stands in its own class. Whereas all the other pyramids, the builders would burrow down into the earth and dig tunnels and tombs and pits into the earth, and on top of this, they would stack stones in a pyramid-like shape. Giza is different. There's a whole other ballgame going on here, because Giza actually has chambers up inside the pyramid itself. Now, Giza is not a tomb for some forgotten king. Giza has a message for us, a message for today. Okay, and like any great puzzle or riddle, there's a key to figuring out what this message is. And the key is what is known as the pyramid inch. Now, the pyramid inch was discovered by a man named HOPI-I-The Smythe. And it is based upon the distance between the North and the South poles. It is an exact fraction of that distance. Now, here I have a photograph of the inside chambers of the Pyramid of Giza. Now, here clearly is shown the passageways descending into the earth, like all other pyramids. But then differently, we have ascending passageways. Now, what HOPI-I-The Smythe found after he discovered the pyramid inch was he found that these passageways are in fact a timeline. And what he needed was simply the 0 point. And he discovered that this was precisely there. Along this passageway represents 0 AD, or the nativity of Jesus. Going back, we go into BC. Going up, we go into AD. Simple. Now, what he discovered going back was different markers and different points within the chamber that seemed to have significance. Now, these different points in the timeline represent significant dates, such as the proclamation of Buddha, of Zoroaster and Krishna and Moses, the Exodus, and many other dates, which I'm not going to go into quite in depth right in this talk. For this information is astounding. This pyramid and the information encoded within this are just a load of information that cannot be sufficiently covered in the time allowed here. But I will say, going back to the pyramid picture, the reason I bring this up is that going forward along the passageway, we also find prophetic dates. The first date we find is the baptism of Jesus in the River Jordan. The next date is the crucifixion, 34 AD. And going up here through the Grand Gallery, which again, I'm not going to get into here all the dates which are encoded specifically to the fourth decimal point and exactly within this Grand Gallery. What I'm interested in is this part right here within the pyramid. This chamber is known as the King's Chamber. Now, I have a blow-up of this picture right here. Now, this picture shows quite clearly the ascending passageway coming from the Grand Gallery, and this large step. You see these actual human figures on there, and how large this step is. Well, at the bottom of this step is 1844, and HOPI-I-The Smythe discovered this. And what he said was that if this date hadn't already passed, for in fact, when he was tooling about within the Pyramid of Giza, Baha'u'llah was making his proclamation in the Garden of Rizwan in 1863. So this date of 1844 had already passed. But what he said is that if it hadn't, he would have thought that would have been the date for the return of Jesus. Now, is this an absurd idea? No, not at all. In fact, there are people all over the world expecting this return of Jesus in 1844. In America we have the Millerites. All the way from the Mississippi River to the East Coast, a third of the people, an and our nation at that time, millions of people, anticipated and believed that in 1844, Jesus was going to come and cleanse the sanctuary. Now, they got this from the Bible. The founder of the Millerite movement was a man named John Miller, and he deciphered a date from the Bible, which said that the sanctuary would be cleansed in 1844. And he interpreted this to believe that Jesus was going to come down from the high and save the world, and they would all be raptured. And in fact, there were many people sitting on top of the roofs at certain times during 1844, waiting for Jesus to come out of the sky, and in laundry baskets, waiting to be raptured. Well, that didn't happen. Obviously that didn't happen, or it'd be in the history books. But what did happen was that date was correct, and that prophecy was fulfilled. You see, they just didn't understand what it was talking about. It was talking about the cleansing of the sanctuary. And what is the sanctuary? This refers to the tabernacle that Moses built. Moses came down from the mountain, and all the people were worshiping a golden calf, an animal for Christ's sake, calling it God. And what did Moses do? He took this animal into the sanctuary, and he killed it mercilessly, horribly. He did all sorts of despicable things, and spread its guts and its blood all throughout the sanctuary. Now, as I say, this prophecy was not mistaken. The Millerites and John Miller, they were not mistaken. They had this date, 1844, right on the money. But they didn't understand that it would not be fulfilled with vain imaginations. This was fulfilled by the coming of the Bab. Bab was a title taken on by a man named Mirza Ali Muhammad in the Middle East. And this in English translates to the gate or the door. And in fact, Jesus did say that he was the gate. He was the door. And this is in the Gospel of John. Now, this 1844 was fulfilled by that gate aspect of Jesus returning. Now, let's go on and see the other aspects that Jesus represented and how they too returned and other personages. Now, back to the blow-up of the King's Chamber, we see this great step, as I mentioned before. And that's March 21st, 1844. Well, when the Bab came, he brought with him a new calendar, and it began on March 21st, 1844. And from that point, we go by that calendar. From that point, one pyramid inch ascending up the passageways and back down the passageways no longer represents one solar year, as Piazzi Smith discovered. No, from this point on, one pyramid inch represents one Baha'i month. And from this point, the next date I will speak of as right here, as we enter the King's Chamber. This date is April 21st, 1863. On that date, Baha'u'llah made his proclamation in the Garden of Rizwan outside Baghdad. Now, this again is found within the King's Chamber. For when we take the King's Chamber in cubic cubits. Now, what is a cubit? Noah built an ark by so many cubits, by so many cubits, by so many cubits, and there is a sacred cubit that is in all the world's teachings, and in fact searched for by men following Newton's instructions. This sacred cubit is simple. It is found several places within the pyramid and is clearly 25 pyramid inches. Now, 25 pyramid inches is about this big. Now, a square cubit would be a square, and a cubic cubit would be a box, 25 by 25 by 25. How many of these are inside the King's Chamber? Precisely 1,280 of them. which is a very significant year in that the year 1863, Baha'u'llah's proclamation, is translated into the Muslim calendar as 1280 years after the Hijrah. Another way of finding the same date within the pyramid. Now, back to the chart again. I'll go to one further date, actually two more. Rising up from the bottom of the floor, we have 100 stones in these walls. And as this was 1863, 100 stones brings us to 1963 at the top. If we keep going up from 1963, still a Baha'i month as a pyramid inch, we find the top being the year 2000. And we find the bottom of this gable as late 1994 or early 1995. But this date here of 1963 is significant. This was the date of the proclamation of the founder, of the establisher of the Baha'i faith, Dr. Leland Jensen. Now, the year 2000, the top of the King's Chamber, this is within Baha'i prophecy, the year in which the kingdom will be firmly established. And that's not so far away. The kingdom really is coming. And we all are preparing for this. Now, I want you to keep these dates in mind. And there's one further date that I will speak of that we will find as we enter into the Mayan prophecies. There is a box within the King's Chamber, a coffer stone. And this is shown here, back on the chart, as these two men are standing on either side of this coffer stone. The dimensions of this coffer stone is exactly 144,000 pyramid inches, cubic pyramid inches. And this too is a number that we will find as we progress into the Mayan prophecies. The first one we discussed was 1844, the second one was 1863, and the third was 1963. The coming of Bab, proclamation of Baha'u'llah, and beginning of the mission of the establisher of the Baha'i faith, Dr. Leland Jensen. Now back to Central America. Let's see how within the prophecies of these native people, if we can find correlation for these dates. For we all know of the famous Mayan calendar. We've discussed the archaeological evidence for a connection between the pyramid cultures that in Egypt and the pyramid cultures in Central America. Now let's look into the legends of the people down there and see what they say. Is this an absurd idea that we Westerners made up, that voyagers came to them long, long ago, 5,000 years ago, and brought them teachings and technologies? No, this is exactly what the legends say. A common theme in all the teachings is that someone from across the sea came and brought them a written language, a calendar system, the idea of tilling the soil and growing corn. But if you're around the different areas, different names are used for the same personages. So the Maya is called Gukmats, or Kukulkan, or Quetzalcoatl, or Itzamna. To the Hopi is the Bahana. Now who is this? Perhaps it is not so important as to who this is, but what this person brought. What he brought them was the tree of life, as spoken of in the books of Genesis. What he brought them was the knowledge of the one true God, or Hunabku, as the Mayan call him, the one infinite, incorporeal essence, omniscient and omnipresent. Now, the reason there are still people down in Mexico, in Guatemala, still practicing the religions that this Itzamna or Kukulkan or Quetzalcoatl, that this person brought him, brought them down there, the reason that there are still people practicing this religion is that it was from the one true God. But of course, this faith, like all faiths, was not immune to a corruption by this powerful priest class, by this ruling class. But again, like all faiths, within it are found pure souls. One of these pure souls that I will talk about is a man named Shalom Balaam. Now, Shalom Balaam was not a major prophet. He was what is known as a minor prophet. In the book, Some Answered Questions, Abdu'l-Baha explains to us that there are, in fact, two distinct classes of prophets. He writes that one are the independent prophets who are followed, and the other kind are not independent and are themselves followers. And it is of this latter class that Shalom Balaam belongs to. He does not have a revelation of his own, simply follows along on the shirt tails of the prophets before him. Shalom Balaam, he wrote several books at the close of the 15th century in the Yucatan. One of them is this book that he wrote in Chumaya. And this book is almost comical in a sense, because it has been gotten hold of by the Spanish Catholic priests. Now, Catholicism is a paganized version of Christianity, plain and simple. With them, the Spaniards brought a whole pantheon of gods, only they called them saints. And this religion was pressed upon the peoples. The strange thing is that down there now, they don't exactly practice Catholicism, and they don't exactly practice the teachings that Quetzalcoatl brought them. What they practice is a mishmash. It was a hodgepodge of both of these, stuck together and stirred together, and is just as a potpourri of paganism and truth. It is difficult to pick out the truth from the paganism, and especially so in this book, because it was in fact translated by Catholic Mayan priests. Another book he wrote, on the other hand, still contains much of the original text. Much of the original meaning is still held within this book of Tzitzit. And the interesting thing about this book is that this prophet correlated along with the Mayan calendar page after page after page of prophecy. It seems like hardly a page goes by without some date or other being given according to the Mayan calendar. Briefly, I'd like to draw your attention here to what is called the Katun wheel. This is the basic structure of the Mayan calendar. And I'm just going to go over this briefly because it is a very deep subject. But first of all, the Mayan year, or ton, it consists of simply 360 days, whereas ours, of course, is 365, with an extra day every leap year. Now, 20 of these tons represents one katun, and one katun is what each block of the wheel represents, which is again a period of 20 tons, or just short of 20 years. 20 katuns, on the other hand, represents a baktun, which is 1,600 tons, or exactly 144,000 days. This katun wheel that the calendar is based on consists of 13 tons. The strange thing about it is that it doesn't start off katun 1, katun 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. As you see, it starts off with 11 ahawa, or katun 11, and then 9, and then 7, and 5, and 3, and all the numbers are jumbled up. And this adds to the difficulty of interpreting and deciphering these prophecies, but once you get the hang of it, it's not all that difficult. So, the The first date that I'm going to discuss doesn't really have a date associated with it. It is more of a prophecy in and of itself. Now, the Mayans believed that history tends to repeat itself along specific cycles. And this Katun wheel, which turned roughly every 256 of our years, was the most important cycle within their calendar system. The prophecy that I'm speaking of goes forth like this. He says that one goes forth as an ambassador, and another awakens its Samna in the west. The temple receives its guests, the bearded ones from the land of the sun. They are the bringers of a sign from our Father God. Blessings in abundance. This is the word of God as he enters the temple. In the last days, learn about the tree of life. Remember your blessings. Lean upon the protection of that tree. Yes, this is your assurance that they come from heaven. Now, at the beginning of this prophecy is the interesting part. He describes three distinct personages. He says that one would go forth as an ambassador, and that another would awaken its Samna in the west. These three personages, the one that went forth as an ambassador, and the other one that would awaken its Samna in the west, correspond to the last three dates given in the book of Daniel in the Old Testament. Daniel gives 4 dates, but the first date works out to 34 AD, which is the year that Jesus died on Calvary on the cross. And this was long before the 15th century and the prophecies that Shalom Balaam was talking about. So it's these last 3 that here we are concerned with. Let's take the first of these, the ambassador. Throughout the books of Shalom Balaam, he speaks of Lord Nine Hawa. Here we have a typical quote. I hope I can find it. Where he says, then in the company with Lord Nine Hawa, or the Lord of the Ninth Katun, descended the words of the warrior of nobility, and the kingdom of Avruk Chabat, the 7-headed serpent, who shielded his son. When this mighty warrior arrived, descending the road of the stars with the abundant life and the living Katun, on the day of Saknival, the faces of the Lord were suffused with living tears, and tears like rain. When the battle for our lives was joined, our warriors looked very ferocious, as if hungering for warfare, for a universal conflict. They went forth into battle with high courage, first acknowledging the authority of the day 9 with a few words. Yet the lords were vanquished. And there was much praying for their lives and shedding of tears at the end, as they lay stretched out on mats, trying to staunch the flowing blood, or laying flat on their backs in heaps. These are the word of the Katun, so be it. Now these words were defeated. And as he says, they lay stretched out on the mats trying to staunch the flowing blood. Much like this calf of Moses, that he too mutilated and destroyed. Now, this is the 9th Katun that he is speaking of. But remember, this is a 20-year period. A Katun is made up of 20 tons, which is just under 20 years, in fact. So what we need is a specific year. In Chumayel, the text gives it to us on page 89 of the text. He specifies exactly which ton it is. He tells us that it was the 9th ton of Katun 9 that the cord descended, the word of God which came from on high all over the entire world. That it was the 9th ton. Now looking on this chart, we can see clearly that this 9th ton is here. Now first, in order to figure out what ton that is, we need a starting place. In the beginning of the book of Shalom Balaam, he gives us his starting place. He says, first off, that a Katun 5 Ahawa began in 1594. And as this wheel turns around, this next came about 256 years later in 1850. counting back from 1850, 20 years was the beginning of the 7th Katun, which brought us to 1830. Now 20 more years brings us to the beginning of the 9th Katun, Mayan. And this is what we're looking for. Beginning in 1811. We lose a year between 1830 and 1811 because there are simply 360 days within our calendar, whereas ours runs on a solar calendar of 365. And those 5 days every year over the years add up. And in fact, during this turn, a year was lost. This one, again beginning in 1811, would bring the 9th ton to 1819. 1819 was the birth of the Baal. Again, this man, Ali Muhammad, Mirza Ali Muhammad, who made his proclamation in 1844, had his birth in 1819. But that's not the date we're looking for. The date we're looking for is 1844. I found this within the Toltec prophecies. The Toltecs have prophecies that in the 13th era, a new spiritual order, or a new advent of spirit would come to the world during the 13th Toltec era. Now, according to many sources, this Toltec era began in 1168. Now, I have another chart pointing to 1168 here as the beginning of the Toltec era. An era of the Toltecs was slightly different than the Mayans. They went on a 52-year cycle. So this second one, the first one would have its beginnings 52 years later in 1220, and the next 52 years later, and next and next and next, in cycles of 52 until we get to the 13th era, which, as we see, began in 1844. Again, year of the proclamation of the Baal. Well, as to the second person, as you recall, he said that one would go forth as an ambassador. As we've shown, this is Lord Mayan. This is the Baal, who was born in 1819 and had his proclamation in 1844. But this second person, who is to awaken someone in the West, who is this? Well, we look through the text, and we find it quite evident, where he says on page 8 of this Tizimin text, he tells us that Lord HOPI-I-The would come, Lord of the 5th Katun. Now he's lamenting at the beginning of this prophecy because of all the tortures that they've endured by the Spanish conquerors, having destroyed all the people who have kept their calendar for so long, have kept the count of the Katun for thousands, for generations and generations. So he is lamenting here at the beginning of this about how are they going to know their Savior when he comes. He writes, "How can we remember the prophecies if there are no fires of the days or the festivals of the Katun? How can the generations of the son of the Itza tell us the days of the prophecies and the days of the 10? How can we celebrate the rites of Lord HOPI-I-The in the 12th ton when he comes in benign holiness?" So this one's a little bit easier. Not only does he tell us that it is in the 5th Katun, as it is Lord HOPI-I-The, it is in the 12th ton of this that he would arrive in benign holiness. Now let's go back to this Katun wheel. As the Katun that he was talking about, Katun 5, began in 1594. As the wheel went around, this came about, as I said, 256 years later, in 1850. The 12th ton of this began in 1862 and ran through to 1863. For their calendar was slightly askew to ours and does not begin in January every single year. And there was the beginnings of this 12th ton in September 30th of 1862. This 12th ton of the 5th Katun began. And it continued till the September of 1863. Now this 1863 is again the second date that we found within the pyramid, of the proclamation of Baha'u'llah. Now even more for this date of 1863. First of all, the book of Daniel, as I spoke of. The book of Daniel, the first date corresponded to 1844, which was the proclamation of the Baal. The second date corresponds to 1863. And this is the proclamation of Baha'u'llah. But even further there is proof within these prophecies of Shandalambaram in the book of Tizimin, where he says that the lords would be imprisoned on the 19th ton, and that this would be a time of broken hearts. Well, as we see, going back to the chart yet again, that the 19th ton began in 1869. 1869, when the lords were imprisoned, was a time of broken hearts. For this was the year that Baha'u'llah arrived at the most great prison of Akka. And Akka was a despicable place, most great prison. It is said that if a bird flew overhead at this prison, it would die before it crossed the city. So here we have the second date. Now we go on to the third person, and the interesting person, the person for our day here in the West. As the prophecy went, the ambassador would go forth, and then another one would awaken somebody in Itzamna in the West. Now, who is this Itzamna? Well, as discussed before, Itzamna is the same culture, the same myth of Quetzalcoatl, of Kukulkan, of Gukamatz. One account of him has him as the ruler of the ancient Toltec capital of Tolán, which is just north of Mexico City, until he was run out of town for opposing human sacrifice. From there, he sailed east. But not before he prophesied his return to this continent, here in the West. Let's look at this idea of light coming again from the east to the west. Abdu'l-Baha is quoted in a book, The World Order of Baha'u'llah, written by Shoghi Effendi, as saying that from the beginning of time until the present day, the light of divine revelation hath risen in the east and shed its radiance upon the west. The illumination thus shed hath, however, acquired in the west an extraordinary brilliancy. Consider the faith proclaimed by Jesus. Though it first appeared in the east, yet it is not until the light had been shed upon the west did the full measure of its potentialities become manifest. He goes on, the day is approaching, when ye shall witness how through the splendor of the faith of Baha'u'llah, the west will have replaced the east, radiating the light of divine guidance. In another passage he writes, the continent of America is in the eyes of the one true God, the land wherein the splendors of his light shall be revealed, where the mysteries of his faith shall be unveiled. As it happened in the time of Adam, and this revelation rose in the east and came to the west, as it happened with the Spirit of Jesus, as this has been taken root in the west too, so it will happen with the Baha'i faith. And this happens with the coming, in 1863, of the establisher of the Baha'i faith, Dr. Leland Jensen. He is this third person who is to awaken in the West. Now, we don't find it as such a surprise that that there's someone to come in the West. When we look through the different cultures in Central America, people in Central America are in fact expecting the return of Kukulkan in this day. The Hopi are expecting the return of the Bahama in this day, in this continent, in the West. In the text in the Chumayel, again by Shalom Balam, even narrows this down further by saying that a new day will dawn in the north. In the west, its sun will arise. In the northwest now, but when is not so specific. It seems as the days went further and further, it was harder for Shalom to see behind the veil into what would happen in the last days. We can know, though, as their cycles were repeating themselves, and the Mayans believed that history did repeat itself very strongly, that as we find that Kukulkan appeared to them last in the 8th Ahau, in the 8th Katun, so too will he appear to them today in the 8th Katun. Now, one final time on the chart, we see that this 8 Ahawa began in 1950 and is a 20-year period all the way through 1970. Now, it is interesting that this does seem to correlate with the last date in the book of Daniel, which Abdu'l-Baha describes clearly as being fulfilled in 1963. I'll read a quote from a book, Baha'u'llah in the New Era. It was written by J.E. Esselman. He says that in the last two verses of the book of Daniel occur the cryptic words, "Blessed is he that waiteth and cometh to the 1,335 days. But go thy way till the end be, for thou shalt rest, and stand in thy lot at the end of the days." Many have been the attempts of learned students to solve the problem of the significance of these words. In a table talk at which the writer was present, Abdu'l-Baha reckoned the fulfillment of Daniel's prophecy from the date of the beginning of the Muhammadan era. Abdu'l-Baha's tablets make it clear that this prophecy refers to the 100th anniversary of the declaration of Baha'u'llah in Baghdad, or the year 1963. Now, as we recall the King's Chamber, this is the date that we find not only within the book of Daniel, but also in the King's Chamber. As we go back to this King's Chamber one last time, or perhaps not, the King's Chamber, as you remember, has the top of the ceiling representing 1963. And this is no coincidence that Dr. Leland Jensen made his mission, the start of his mission, in 1963, in the northwest part of this continent, in Deer Lodge. It is him who is still alive in this world today. It is him who brings this sign of our Father God. And this is the tree of life. This is the symbol of unity. So what is this unity? What is to be the center of our unity? Well, it's going to be the covenant. And what is the covenant? Covenant is a promise. Covenant is complex. But basically it is the promises that have been made to our people from our Creator. The covenant was something given to Abraham. So for a long time the Jews thought that because they were physically descended from him, that they would just receive this promise. But when Jesus appeared, when he appeared 2,000 years ago, what he said is no. That it is through faith in the covenant that the Gentiles will come in and inherit the earth, the kingdom. And it is through lack in faith that they can be chopped off. Paul says in Romans that the root of Jesse shall come. He who rises to rule the Gentiles, in him shall the Gentiles hope. So it was Jesus Christ who promised the Gentiles an inheritance in the kingdom. Paul said, though, that it was in the root of Jesse that their hope remained. And this is Baha'u'llah. The ancient root. For Jesse was the father of King David. King David, the David that slew Goliath and all that. And Baha'u'llah was literally descended from King David on the throne through Solomon. And according to Christianity's own words here, it is only through the covenant that Baha'u'llah brings that they can enter into this kingdom on earth. That they are only allowed to enter it into heaven. But Baha'u'llah is the Christ come again. He's the one offspring that is the true inheritor of the throne of David, of all of this, so that it is through his faith that all the people are grafted into this tree as descendants of Abraham. To inherit this promise, but that doesn't mean that they're all descendants of David. We are not all descendants of King David or Abraham. But through our faith in the covenant, through our faith in our religion, and in fact all the religions are stemming from Abraham. This is true. Abraham had 3 wives. Through Hagar, Muhammad and the Bab descended. Through his wife Keturah, was sent to the east, Krishna and Zoroaster and Buddha are descended. And through Sarah, Baha'u'llah and Jesus were descended. So you see, all the people in the world, no matter what religion they are, through this faith, they are already on this tree. The Christians too. But if they do what the Jews did back at the time of Jesus, if they do that to Baha'u'llah, when his message is proclaimed to them, if they reject him, they too will be broken off this tree. But anybody that might be an atheist or any religion, if they accept Baha'u'llah, they're grafted into this tree, and they receive this promise. Well, I'd like to leave you with one final quote from Abdul-Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, where he says that all leaf upon this tree of life, the tree of life which is made mention in the Bible, is Baha'u'llah, and the daughters of the kingdom are the leaves upon which of that blessed tree. And thank thee, God, that thou hast become related to that tree, and that thou art flourishing, tender, and fresh. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Kyle. I want the people at home to realize that with the elimination of prejudice of all kinds, that no matter what religion a people belong to, if it originates from God, we should accept the truth of it. And I thank you again, Kyle, for enlightening us. I have a new calendar and some new words. It was a very informative talk. And you can see us Friday next week at 7 o'clock here on Channel 7 on MCAT, and we'll have another one of our talks, and you'll be able to call in and ask more questions. That's all the time we have for tonight. Thank you.